Hello and welcome to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Happy Friday to everyone. I'm your host Manny Maradiegue. On the last episode of this week, bring you guys some more NFL topics and stories that I wanted to get into today to kind of wrap up the week, wrap up what's been going on at the NFL Combine, especially today, leading into tomorrow with the quarterbacks now arriving at the Combine. And that leads me into my biggest story today. Caleb Williams spoke earlier this morning, here still on Eastern Time, at the NFL Combine. And he had some interesting things to say that I wanted to get into and kind of break down here for you guys what I thought of it and what it could potentially mean. I also wanted to start off with the chip shot story, like always, talking about the Vice President of Football Operations, Troy Vincent, and his comments on the very controversial Tush push that has become a lot more popular over the last season, leading into the one before that, and what he thinks about it and his thoughts on potentially banning it, if he's for it or not. That's coming up in just a few seconds. After that, I wanted to talk some trade talks in the NFL, some rumors, really most of all, and also the bigger story that the Browns general manager potentially pushing for a pushback on the trade deadline and all the stuff involved with that. And then in the second half of the show, I'll just give you a free agency update on more rumors and some stuff that has been finalized and concrete over the last few days. Now that February has come to an end and we're entering March, I wanted to bring you guys some more updates on that. That'll be in the second half of the show. And I'll start it off now with the chip shot segment. But before I get into that, I want to remind you guys to, again, please use the tip and donations link with any questions that you may have there. You can see it running across the ticker below me. The tip and donations link is gsmcsportsnetwork.net. Again, if you're listening to this, it's gsmcsportsnetwork.net. This just makes sure I'm able to read your question on the air. Whenever you guys get a chance to comment, engage with me during these live episodes, using that link, I'm able to see it on there and read the question on air and have more of a discussion with you guys. It's also a massive help for the show, for the network, and all the shows on it, and we greatly appreciate it every time you guys are able to do that. That being said, I'm able to jump into the first segment, as always, the chip shot segment of the show, and I wanted to get into the Tush push. That is one of the topics of conversation leading off with the theme that I've kind of had going this week over some potential rule changes. I mentioned the drop hip tackles potentially being banned. I also touched on earlier in the week on some other rule changes that could be coming to the NFL. The kickoff format, I just thought of it, I just remembered that the kickoff format that also could be changed that the competition committee is looking into. Now they're talking about the Tush push. A lot of people have their own thoughts about it, whether you're for it or against it. It's always been in the news. The more prevalent team that uses it to the best of their abilities is the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're the ones that kind of came up with the whole term Tush push, the brotherly shove, if you will, in other terms. But regardless of what you want to call it, it's always been a topic of conversation. Really, in all their games, it's always brought up. They always do it multiple times during the game in short yardage situations. And say what you want about it, subjectively, it's a very effective play. You can't deny that. It's almost a freebie when it's fourth and short, 4th and 1, maybe 4th and 2. For any team to line up in it, go for it. And basically, if you're if you're unaware of it, it's basically like a QB sneak, but you got usually two people lined up behind the quarterback. At least the way the Eagles did it, they had two people lined up behind him. And once he snaps the ball, quarterback goes down, they sneak it, but they also have two guys pushing him from behind, trying to get those extra yards if they need to. And it works about like 99% of the time, 98% of the time, and it's very surprising when it doesn't work. But that's kind of where this whole issue starts to boil up a little bit because, some people may say that it's too overpowered. It's dangerous potentially for, the guys that end up at the bottom of the pile. And it's so close range, such tight quarters that, some guys might get hurt in there. And you got guys jumping over now the pile just to stop it, and it could hurt the quarterback if it hits him wrong in the top of the head or something like that. And there's all these questions around it, issues that people like to bring up. So now that we're in the off season, this is a time to really talk it over. If this is really an issue, this is the time to solve it. And the Executive Vice President of Football Operations, Troy Vincent, they kind of asked him about it at the NFL Combine. I'm pretty sure it was NBC, or that's where at least I saw one of the outlets that interviewed him about it and brought it up to him. And the general feeling that he communicated to them was that, the tush push is generally the sensation around the league, generally around the tush push, is that it's more of a credit to the Eagles that they found a short yardage situation, formation, play that just works so well for them. He goes on to say, why would we punish them for finding almost like a loophole in a play in the game of football? Why would they punish them for doing that, being creative enough to find a way to create something that nobody else has really thought of or has done it to the level of execution or to the level of excellence that they've done it in? So those were his opening remarks. He did have the other side of it, the understanding side that other teams might still, feel a certain way about it, not agree with it completely. And he went on to say in the interview that I saw that the NFL Competition Committee is still, discussing about it, or that they actually didn't discuss it at the meeting at the Combine because everyone mostly agrees on it on the Competition Committee, and that's only a handful of teams. But he did go on to say that at the other league meetings, probably in Florida or down in Miami at the end of March, I think it's the 27th or the 24th to the 27th, they'll have their league meeting. Again, that's where more owners and really the whole league gets together and talks these things out. And he said it'll be brought up, he's sure, again there, and they'll talk about it more there to give other teams that aren't on the competition committee their time to speak on it and give some reasons why they feel it should stay or why they feel it should be banned on the other hand. But just to give you my thoughts on it, I kind of alluded to it before. It's not like the Eagles are the only team that can do it. Everyone is able to do it. It's just if they feel that they have the personnel to do it. Not everybody has the Eagles' offensive line. They're obviously really good at it because of their offensive line. And just on the injury part of it, you haven't really seen too many injuries come because of the tush push or things that are involved with the tush push. The only big one I do remember is Patrick Mahomes when he injured his knee really bad in that game there. I forget who it was. I'm pretty sure it was in the playoffs, but he hurt it really bad I think 2 years ago now. And that was like a real scare for him, not only because he's Patrick Mahomes, but because it was a really serious knee injury. And it could have been worse. Thankfully it wasn't, but that was the only real injury issue that I remember seeing with the tush push. Other than that, it might take everyone to get up off of each other, but it seems to be over really quick. It doesn't last more than 10 seconds, 15 at most, and everybody just props up after a while, and they just continue on with the drive. And like I mentioned, everyone is able to do it, so I don't see why the league would punish just one team and force everyone not to do it, just to stop making the Eagles seem so overpowered with this one play. On top of it, it's such a routine-ish play. Like, there's not too much that goes into it that you can really change about it. If I were to think about what I would change if the league does decide to go further with this, I think the only thing you could really change is have nobody push the quarterback, or maybe just limit it to one person pushing the quarterback. Maybe two's too overpowered. The league could say only one person is able to line up behind him, have their hands on his backside and push him. Or you could limit it to a certain amount of times. You do it per drive, or per half, or per halves, or even per game. That's another thing that you can do just off the top of my head. So the Eagles aren't always lining up in the tush push formation every third down. Say they get 3rd and 1 like 4 times in a drive. It's very demoralizing for the defense. I get it. But on the other side, if it's so demoralizing, do something about it. Really is what it comes down to. If you don't like it, do something about it. Try and stop them to get them to stop and stop running it. But that's another thing I felt that they could do. Limit it to the amount of time. It's probably per drive. I think per game would be a little bit too extreme. If you do it per game, you might as well ban it instead of keeping count. If you go that route, I feel like you're going to get more iterations of the tush push. More people are going to try to change the finest detail about what is considered a tush push, and then you're going to get a whole other argument of like, oh no, that wasn't a tush push, that shouldn't count on the number of times we can do it, or yeah, like that should have been a tush push, and it just gets too complicated and it'll slow the game down a lot more. The game's already like 4 hours long. If you get into all these small details, if they're able to be reviewed, the game's going to be too long. It's going to feel like a baseball game, and the way baseball's going with how long the game is, they've had to speed it up because nobody could stay or pay attention for that long. Football's the next longest one, so I think that'll just make it longer, and it might hurt you in some other areas like that. But it is funny just because of how efficient everyone's been with it. There was a period of time when the Eagles were really efficient with it 2 seasons ago, and they were just killing everybody. They were on a roll. They were probably the best team in football other than the Chiefs, and everybody had an issue with it then. And then this past season came along, and the Eagles struggled towards the end of the season, and you saw some teams actually stop it. And I think the chatter went down a bit, and it's funny in that aspect because it's only an issue when the team that's really good finds a loophole and just makes them almost impossible to stop. Now that they're struggling a little bit, they seem more normal, like an average team. They're still able to do it, but nobody goes up and makes a big deal out of it because they can stop it, and they're an average team. It's not like they're overpowered in any way. So that's another aspect of it that I thought was pretty just ironic, that it's, they only try and knock you down really when you're the best team in football. They try to find issues when you're at the top, but then when you're average, below average on the standings, nobody has an issue with really whatever that you're doing. And if you do change a play like this, it's not such a complicated play. It's not a new play that it's been around for forever. It's basically a QB sneak. And if you do change it, does that open up this whole box of what you can change, what other people now suggest to change, and then the rules, the nuances of what is actually football start to change. So I think if they change this, it'll lead into more routes of people trying to change, I don't know, other plays of maybe what's considered like a holding or something like that. People will try to change all these other rules, and then it gets made into a bigger mess. So I think the league is better off as they stand right now. As Troy Vincent said, they're not in a place where they think it should be banned, and I think they should continue like this, but we'll see where it ends up. Yeah, it's an interesting thing to follow because of how just ridiculous and big it's all gotten, but we'll just put a pin in that, and I'm going to send it to a quick break. That'll do it for segment 1, but stick around to find out what Caleb Williams, the presumed number 1 pick, said at the NFL Combine today, and what reasons he gave for why he's not throwing, doing any drills at the Combine, and why he's not even presenting a medical at the Combine. All that, plus 2 more other stories coming up on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Don't go anywhere.